In modern conspiracy theory, as well as less contemporary times, there's been a belief that a small group of individuals, mostly composed of bloodline families and families of ancestors in the Illuminati, have controlled this planet, have developed a master plan that they have gradually implemented over time. Many of the first organizers of that master plan knew that they would never see their working completed. However, they handed down their secrets and rituals to each generation. The ultimate goal is the oligarchical power system, where less than 1% of the total population controls over 90% of its wealth. It is almost a mainstay in conspiracy theory research. It is proposed that the power they gather will perpetuate the ability for them to enslave the poor and the disparate. This abuse of power has been said to be influenced by Luciferian doctrine and esoteric symbology. Animal sacrifice has been used for thousands of years to show devotion to many gods. Many of them are considered profane. They are the purveyors of war, pestilence, and confusion. We have been privy to and have been groomed into many unknown rituals that we collectively have to basically look at and feel the post-traumatic shock. I think that it would be a shock, or it would be a great deal of shock to Americans who are now entranced in the stand by Ukrainian spell, that weeks before Russia attacked Ukraine, that the headlines in world papers were not at all favorable to Zelensky's government. The Guardian's headline was, "Welcome to Ukraine, the most corrupt nation in Europe." And New Europe News had a headline that said, "Ukrainian president rule becomes increasingly corrupt and authoritarian." Vox, a well-known liberal left-leaning site, a headline with, "A Ukrainian comedian turned president is embroiled in Trump's impeachment mess." In fact, many people who read the international headlines know full well that before Putin's attacks, Ukraine was seen as Zelensky's smaller, poorer, even more corrupt mini-me to Putin's Russia. Now, as the media is first introduced to a sigil that looks like a letter Z on the tanks of Russian military equipment, they are reluctant to explaining why we see Sonnenrads that Ukrainian soldiers proudly display on their chests and on their insignia. Now, what is a Sonnenrad? Well, we were talking about the sun. Well, a Sonnenrad is a black sun sigil made popular by Nazis in World War II and is still used by neo-Nazi groups and current Azov battalions in Ukraine. Now, along with other symbols from the Nazi era, such as the wolf's angle, the Sig Armanen rune, and the Totenkopf, the black sun is employed by some neo-Nazi adherents of Satanism as a symbol of various Aryan cults. Now, Putin has insisted that this war also has a spiritual scope and has said that Ukraine suffers spiritually, which makes the war sound more and more like a fulfillment of some sort of prophetic portent to Armageddon. Even though Russian President Vladimir Putin justified his invasion of Ukraine in part as a defense of the Moscow-oriented Orthodox Church, leaders of both Ukrainian Orthodox factions are fiercely denouncing the Russian invasion and are calling Putin the Antichrist. Now, what's interesting is my guest tonight, MICAH DANK, we were talking earlier about Michael the Archangel, talking about Aries, talking about Mars. Well, on February 23rd, hours before the world would hear that Russia had invaded Ukraine, a statue of St. Michael the Archangel, the patron saint of Kiev, began to emit a dark liquid which appeared to be blood. While a statue of Michael the Archangel can be seen in the center of Kiev, it's depicted with a shield and a sword. The bleeding statue of Michael was in Colorado. Alicia Martinez of Broomfield, Colorado, is the owner of the statue, and while speaking to a friend on the phone, one of her roommates knocked on her bedroom telling her to come quickly. She asked what was happening, and she was standing there shaking. She saw the statue of St. Michael appearing to bleed from the right side of his head. She added, "It was dripping like when you cut yourself and blood drips out. That's how it was." Still questioning her experience, Martinez called a friend of hers who's a priest in Mexico. He told her this was nothing bad. Instead, he told her to pray more, that what was occurring was marvelous, and that her home was blessed. Again, another coincidence, another synchronicity for our guest tonight, MICAH DANK, who is with us, astrotheology, astrology, all of the things that we like here at Ground Zero. So, MICAH, here we are talking about Aries. We're talking about St. Michael the Archangel. He is the patron saint of Kiev. And then in Colorado on February 23rd, a statue of Michael the Archangel is bleeding. Blood is coming from its head. What do you think of that? What do you make of that?
I mean, well, if we take it back a little before to what you were talking about with Russia and the Black Sun, the Black Sun is actually Saturn. The planet used to be called the Black Sun. It used to be known as our second sun.
Right.
Now, if you go on Wikipedia and you look up Saturn, it'll tell you that it was discovered in 1610 by Galileo. Okay? But that's nonsense, okay? Because of all, everybody knows about the Saturnalia worship and the Saturnalia cult that existed during the Roman times.
Right.
Okay, so they blatantly lie to you on the internet. What they are trying to forget to tell you is that Saturn used to be a lot closer to us, much closer to us. People used to actually be able to see it. And we still, to this day, worship Saturn in a couple of ways. Starting with women. Women wear earrings. Okay, the ring is for Saturn.
Right.
They were told to listen to their god, so they'd get their ears pierced so they could listen to their god, Saturn, with the ring. Men wear wedding rings, wedding bands. It's literally a ring because you had to pledge your fidelity in front of your god. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it all goes back to either Saturn worship or sun worship. Okay, and those were the two competing suns at the time. Right. As far as the statue that bleeds, I mean, you keep hearing about things like that happening, but I can't imagine that being real. I just can't. I don't know.
It looks. When I saw it, it looked terrifying. I don't know. It was if it's a hoax, it's a huge hoax. But it's not
Right.
just the idea that it's hoaxed. Okay, the idea here is that we have a story and a claim from a woman that Michael the Archangel was bleeding. A statue of Michael the Archangel was bleeding. And she had no idea what the significance of Michael the Archangel is. We're looking at Michael the Archangel being the patron saint of Kiev. And he's standing there with a sword, a gold sword, and a gold shield. And now he's bleeding. And then you're talking about Aries. We're talking about Mars. We're talking about the Ides of March, the rise of Mars, the rise of Aries, and how now the bleeding of Aries, the bleeding of Michael, is now being claimed by a woman in Colorado. I mean, I just find the synchronicities remarkable, even with going all the way back to the animal sacrifices in Rhode Island that were discovered, the bags of the heads of the animals, and of course the release of this demon from this rock in Japan, which obviously